Well, hello peeps! We got a solo shuffle guide on how I play enhancement and what I did to reach 2k. There will be timestamps down below as per usual. So, the pros and the cons. There is no pros. Okay. Jokes aside, it has good sustained damage when you got uptime, many ways to interrupt casters, short CD kick, sundering, grounding totem. It has, I think, the strongest off healing in the game. As far as the hybrid classes are considered, I would just say no other class can kind of come close to the amount of healing that the Shaman can do. Great team utility, grounding totem, tremor totem, static field totem, earth shield, just a lot of team utility. Now the cons, there might be a few, but they're quite a big cons, I would say. So, poor survivability. Just like one of the worst survivability, all healing based, which is like in Solo Shuffle, that's the worst kind of survivability to have, is healing based and shield based survivability. Low mobility, it has one of the worst mobilities of all melee specs. Sure, you can run run at 100% in Ghost Wolf, but you're gonna be running 100%, that's it. It has, I've already harped in previous videos, but it has the worst gap closer, the worst charge ability of all the charges. 30-second charge with no root, no nothing. The damage is like absolutely like a joke. Counterable burst, damage that is based on procs. Your burst is very easy to counter, either through CC, disarm, or just like people knowing when they see like Doomwind's having a V-Cora for it. Bad hard CC, the only melee in the game with no hard stun. And I do not count Lightning Lasso as a hard stun. So talent builds. There is a few different talent builds, but I use Storm Strike focused ones. The only difference being in the Shaman talents that I use. The build with Swirling Currents and Ancestral Guidance I use generally more often. It is easier to play with and is also a lot better versus ranged comps, as Thunderstorm and Lightning Lasso don't have as much value and are 3 times as hard to use. Versus double melee comps, going into Lasso build is a little bit better. It's hard to play this way, as your heals are not as consistently potent, and both Thunderstorm and Lasso require kind of situational knowledge, game sense. Basically, you will survive a lot better versus melee teams, but the skill cap on the build is higher. There are also the elemental style builds, lava lash builds, and although they might be better in PvE, in PvP they are directly nerfed, like not much to say there. One is directly buffed in PvP, the other is directly nerfed. You're basically told what you're allowed to play by Blizzard. And trust me, I have given them a god honest try, even swapping out items for better stats. One build is directly nerfed, while the other one is directly buffed. So just a little talent overview. So the main synergy on the enhancement side is Overflowing Maelstrom with Legacy of the Frost Witch. Every time you get a 10 Maelstrom stack ability used, you're basically getting a huge 25% physical damage modifier. This is basically the main thing. It buffs all your other kind of Storm Strike main things, and also your Doomwinds, Wind Fury. On the Shaman side, it's more interesting. Here we got the Lightning Lasso build. Here you have a kind of a free point. You can use this in like Capacitor Totem if you want to understand, Cleanse Spirit, or I use it here in Spirit Wolf because I use this build as to kite melees more, so this kind of helps you in doing that, and also kind of makes gives Ghost Wolf a reason. It gives you a reason to be in Ghost Wolf, basically. Other than that, it's really just Thunderstorm and Lightning Lasso. You're grabbing these so you can have some range utility. As I call it range utility because that's really what it is. Knocking back people, and then of course having a stun that can be kicked and it has to be channeled. So this is the build that I run more often. It's just Healing String Totem, Swirling Currents, and Ancestral Guidance instead of going for improved Lightning Bolt, Thunderstorm, and Lightning Lasso. Here I have Elemental Warding, but this can be switched out for Totemic Surge if you're facing more physical damage comps and you still want to use this build. The selling point of this build is basically that when you cast Healing String Totem, not only are you healing your whole team, but your next 3 heals are buffed without you having to cast Focused Insight to get your heal buffed. You also have Ancestral Guidance, which is gonna heal your team a lot if you're bursting, you use it on your burst or when you're cleaving. It also can be used to just simply buff your heals. As far as PvP talents are considered, it's pretty simple. You wanna always have Ride the Lightning, Static Field Totem, then you kind of have a choice between grounding totem and I will switch it out for Counter-Strike totem versus like teams that are completely melee and you have like no abilities that you can actually ground. Other than that, right, the lightning can actually be swapped out for Swirling the Waves, but usually if you're using Swirling the Waves, if you're having to heal like yourself that much, you're pretty much gonna be losing. You have to be thinking of something else. Gearing. As Enhance is simple. As much Versa and Haste as possible. Mastery is good, Crit is your worst possible stat. At this point you can get your 4-set with the Revival Catalyst, might be next week, but there's like no reason to not run it. You don't lose as much Versa as I originally feared. You do still lose some defense, as all your defense is your heals. The only weird choice comes from the weapons, where actually going for World PvP ones is better for stats. I see a lot of people having both. I see a lot using standard glad ones. I personally use both. I use the standard glad one in my main hand since it has more weapon DPS, and main hand weapon DPS just gives more damage than offhand. That's why in my offhand I have the World PvP ones, as it gives you the correct stats. Is this the best option? I have absolutely no idea. I just thought it was a compromise that made sense to me. Other than that, as usual, the necessary crafted item is going to be the boots, especially needed on a class like Enhance, which just dies in CC. I don't think there's much to add here. Unnecessary would be the Lariat and the crafted ring. Again, if you can get these, it's absolutely amazing. It's just that they are much harder to obtain compared to boots, so the effort to benefit is less. Rotation, as I usually say, the most important thing to try and get down and make it kind of muscle memory. Basically, you don't want to be thinking about it at all and try to focus as much on the actual game. So starting off with the sustained damage breakdown, the Storm Strike build is kind of a classical click what glows with a priority in Maelstrom empowered abilities, then Ice Strike, then Storm Strike. Of course, you also want to try and keep your Flame Shock debuff and your Wind Fury totem up. The trick comes from the fact that you have a very short lasting slow, forcing you to weave in Frost Shock basically on CD or use one of your other CC abilities. You also want to be using Feral Spirits basically on cooldown, except when you're having Doom Winds coming up really soon. Then you would want to save it for the Doom Winds window. This leads us into the mini burst rotation, which is basically used when Doom Winds are on CD. You want to make sure Feral Spirits are up, you have 10 Maelstrom for an Elemental Blast and Sundering. Basically just Elemental Blast to get the Legacy of the Frost Witch buff into Sundering into sustained damage. It's not really much other than making sure you got all the damage modifiers up. Next is the standard Doom Winds burst. Everything is basically the same as the mini burst rotation, except you're trying to put in as many Wind Fury proccing abilities. These would be Storm Strike, Ice Strike, Crash Lightning and Sundering. You would want to save Sundering for when you have already used Storm Strike to try and possibly get a Storm Flurry proc, as you want to fit in as many Storm Strikes. The trick to maximizing the damage comes from actually having a lot of forceful wind stacks before you even pop Doom Winds. You're making sure you have a Trinket or an Enchant proc. This is why I hate Doom Winds. It's a very luck-based thing, because sometimes you're just not gonna get any forceful wind stacks. But basically you have to be fortunate enough to get a lot of forceful winds, you know, early in the buff, as it does not reset. Then make sure you have a Trinket or a weapon proc, followed by getting lucky with Storm Flurry procs. It's just beyond inconsistent. This leads us into the final ultimate Ascendance Burst, which again is just combining a luck factor with another luck factor. It's almost exactly the same as the Doom Winds Burst rotation, except you have an absolute priority on Wind Strike. Again, I absolutely hate this. Ascendance procs are literally can make or break you, and getting like 2 back-to-back can almost like one-shot people. Like, it's insane how much damage it can do when it procs, and it feels so bad when you get none. So, some final tips and tricks. Although this tip is basically for all classes, I just think on Enhance is more important, and that's to have a focus or kind of arena target markers for your kick. If there is one specialty that Enhance has over other melee specs, is that it has a low CD range kick. It's the only strength that it has over other melees, and you should make sure you use it. I didn't talk about these in the previous guide, as CC you can kind of tab target to some degree, while kicking I feel like is a lot harder to just tab target, needs to be instant. Be smart on how you use your team utility, specifically referring to totems here. Don't just toss out Grounding Totem, Tremor Totem. Try to negate specific abilities with those. Same with the static field totem and air grab totem. Don't just throw these out willy-nilly. Try to block a mobility ability with the static field totem or an escape attempt. Use it to kite away melees who are slaughtering you. Try to make sure you're not wasting these abilities. Like, I'm no saint personally here, I catch myself tossing these out unnecessarily a lot, but it's just something to keep in mind. Another thing will be learning when to hold stacks for healing and when you're free to use it for damage. This unfortunately would take some time, there's no like real rules. The only thing is versus casters, your Maelstrom generation is diminished, so holding on the Maelstrom is mainly gonna happen versus double caster comps. If you're casting more than like 2 or 3 heals in about 15 seconds, you know, yeah, the kind of 15 seconds window is when you have to think about other options. It basically means that you're losing and you have to think of something. Like this again depends on both your and your enemy's team's composition. Like versus range, you can just hide behind a pillar, you know, try to get some resources to fight again. Versus melee, it's a little bit trickier since it's not just line of sighting and you can be putting your healer in a bad position if you just bring 2 melees behind a pillar with your healer. Use Astral Shift wisely. It's your only defensive. Again, this will take some game sense, learning when your healer can get you and when they can't get you. Of course, if you see the enemies pop all their main offensive cooldowns, do not wait to just pop it. In the rare cases that you will not be the target, use your off healing. I don't think any other hybrid class can even compare to your off healing. Earth Shield not only buffs your healing, but also your healer's healing, so just make sure you're keeping Earth Shield on your teammate and using your heals when they are in trouble. So some final thoughts. If you have chosen to push 0 to 1800 with Enhance, I commend you. I have already quite a few videos on the problems of the class and how Blizzard is failing its design and what they could do to make it better. So I'm not gonna harp on that here. But it's definitely a challenge compared to other specs. You are extremely squishy, you have one of the most counterable bursts, which is again based to a significant amount on luck, and even if it doesn't, you know, get countered, you're a melee who does all his damage in melee but has range mobility and range utility. So you get my commendation. Since I have a few full solo shuffle videos out on Enhance, you're welcome to watch those for more of a commentary style video on the gameplay itself. Next we are getting the Fury 0 to 1800 guide, which should be coming out on the weekends. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all those things the YouTuber wants you to do, and have a nice day.